Everyone, thank you for joining us. My name is Peter Onan, and I am a spiritual teacher, and you can find more about me in the services that I offer at my website, peteronan.com. And today we have Micki O'Brien, who is an alternative education leader, and we're going to be talking about the topic of neurodiversity and what that all entails. And first off, I just wanted to give you all a little bit of an opportunity to get to know who Micki is. So Micki, the first question for you is, who are you, what do you do, and just tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll get into the topic of today.
Wow. I wasn't ready for that question. Well, I am a person who marries many different frameworks. I use integral theory. I use Alison Armstrong's PAX work. I use different metaphysical practices and Buddhism and meditation. I have a master's degree in environmental leadership and a bachelor's degree in sociology. And I've studied math and computer science too. So I marry science and metaphysics. My mentor works with neurology and metaphysics together. So I use that a lot, kind of along the lines of Siegel. And I've been a teacher. I've been a leader. I help work with all different kinds of learners. I help people line up. I started a company called Aligned Education that helps folks line up with the education that they really want, that's going to help thriving success, because that's one of my big beliefs.
And aren't you also an autism expert as well?
I am.
Okay.
I have a documentary called Autism, Love, and Learning on YouTube. And I have a TEDx talk that's about neurodiversity and neurodivergence. The TEDx talk is TED, the organization titled the talk Tapping Into Your Superpowers. I had actually titled the talk Creating Your New Normal. Okay. So when you listen to it, you'll hear the new normal over and over again, because that's the title I gave it. But tapping into your superpowers gets you more hits. So that's why it's called.
Perfect. All right. Definitely go look those up on YouTube. So today's topic, we're going to talk about neurodiversity. And I guess the first question for you, Micki, is what is neurodiversity?
It's so interesting, Peter, because I talked about it in my TEDx talk. People use terminology around neurodiversity and neurodivergence slightly incorrectly, just because there's just not a lot of information, accurate information out there. So there are 4 terms that I'm going to give you just to kind of set things, set the framework for what we're talking about. So neurodiversity is simply the diversity of neurology that exists in the world. It's a very simple term that is just another term for diversity. There is a wide diversity of neurology in the world. Now within that, under that umbrella of neurodiversity, in the conventional way of talking about it, we have 2 terms. We have neurodivergence and neurotypical. And this is all based on the societal standard of normal. So did I put that, those are air quotes.
Which I like to point out to people, the dictionary definition of normal means average.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And I personally don't believe that any of us really fit that box. And that box is an important framework to understand, to be able to have discussions about uniqueness and difference. And one of the things my teacher likes to say over and over again is the brain only learns by the perception of a difference. So we have to make a distinction so that our brain will actually learn something. So we clarify our terms and we set out that difference so that we can actually get it and use it and apply it in our lives. Otherwise, it'll just slide right over our very efficient brains that don't want to use that extra work. It takes extra resources, extra calories, extra energy, extra bandwidth to actually learn. Okay, so neurodivergent and neurotypical. And in my TEDx talk, I talk about the Frost poem, where you're going down a path and you take the trail, the path that's less traveled by. So divergence means to diverge from. Neurodivergence is someone whose neurological functions significantly diverge from the dominant societal standard of normal. Air quotes again. Neurotypical is someone whose neurology fits within the dominant societal standard of normal. And there are a lot of, there's a big impact from this simple way of doing this, because we think that neurotypical box is the place we want to get people to. And it's a very conventional way of thinking. And I'm not saying that it's bad, broken, or wrong. I'm saying that we can be more when we include people who are neurodivergent. Instead of trying to make them neurotypical, we actually expand our culture to be supportive of people being unique. Because of this, because I feel like neurotypical and neurodivergent are inadequate to work with how I work in the world, I coined the term neuro-uniqueness, or neuro-unique, which actually implies that all of us are neuro-unique. Some of us are more neuro-unique than others, but it actually does away with the dominant societal standard of normal, or the normal box, which I talk about in my TEDx talk. And just to give you an idea of what neurodivergence is in the standard way of talking about it, a lot of times it's used to talk specifically about people who are on the autism spectrum, which is actually inaccurate. And it is used like kind of culturally thrown around. Somebody says neurodivergent or even neurodiversity and seems to think that that means autism or somehow close to or on the autism spectrum. And it's just, it's inaccurate. If you have ADHD, dyslexia, autism, anxiety, depression, if you have a head injury, if you meditate, if you've had a spiritual awakening, if you're an amazing athlete or are able to get yourself into a flow state, all of these different altered states of consciousness or abilities to be in your consciousness, they all actually imply neurodivergence. So in my TEDx talk, I say that at least 30% of the world population is neurodivergent. I actually believe that it's at least 40% of the world population, and that as more and more people are waking up, it's more and more people. I mean, if you meditate, you become neurodivergent.
Can you give an example of, I'm just thinking, you know, maybe there's some famous people out there that you can give an example of someone that's classically neurotypical and someone that's classically neurodivergent.
Oh, that is interesting. I would say Robin Williams would be classically neurodivergent. And Jim Carrey, right? They really have this uniqueness, this genius ability to tap into this different state of consciousness. I don't know who I would think is neurotypical.
Well, maybe you can just give some examples of, you know, a fictional person. A
neurotypical person, like really, really like textbook neurotypical person, is somebody who just really, really, really fits in. They frame things, the way they actually think about things and frame them and speak about them and understand them is very normal. It's not, there's not a lot of divergence. It's very much like, and they're not even conscious of it usually. Can I bring hegemonic forces in here?
Yes, please do, because I really want to dive a little deeper into this concept of what is normal and what is not normal. And again, I want to remind people that the definition of normal just simply means average.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people grow up with this idea of they really want to fit in and they really want to be normal, but they don't even know what they're wanting.
Yeah, and it's an acceptance thing too. Like, we're hardwired to be pack animals, so we want to be accepted. It's where we're safe. And when we really get into our uniqueness, we can feel in our neurology like we're not safe. So, like, for example, I've spent a lot of my life attempting to hide my uniqueness, my divergence, because I've been afraid. I mean, we use the word divergent like it's a bad thing. Like, we sometimes will refer to like a sociopath as a divergent. Like, that person is not normal. And one of my like dear family members just posted a thing about how kids that have disabilities, and I put a quote around that too, because I consider we're just differently abled, right? I don't, yeah. So she put this quote up on Facebook or social media somewhere about how people that have disabilities, they just want to be accepted. And I'm like, that's kind of interesting, because I don't think of it that way. I think I want culture to be bigger. So let me get into hegemonic forces, and that helps explain that a little bit. So hegemonic forces are loosely connected to hegemony, which is an effort to make things the same. Like when we homogenize milk, we make all the molecules in the milk the same. Hegemonic forces, it's a sociological term, and it really just means the way that our culture is around us that we're not conscious of, because it's our normal. And there's the word normal. And the way I really love to teach it when I'm teaching it to high school or college students is I like to say, it's like we're this bird, because we all, in our souls, we all have this freedom. And we're this bird that's in this bird cage, and we don't realize we're in this bird cage, because the bars of the bird cage are wide enough that what we do is we put our head through the bars so that the bars are on either side of us. Here's the hegemonic forces, but we don't see them because we're looking, we don't see those bars. And those bars include like beliefs about what it means to be male or female. That includes beliefs about your socioeconomic status. Your, like, when I was growing up, it was implied that I was not intelligent because of my dyslexia, and because I think about things differently. And there's this belief about IQ. That's one of my very favorite things, like the IQ tests were developed to keep low-income people of color out of leadership in the military. That's where they came from. So all of these efforts to standardize, which standardization is another tool in normalization, standardization can be used as a useful tool to get things done, but it is also sometimes used as a tool to flatten out culture and uniqueness, and we actually end up getting robbed of geniuses. So like one of the things I see happen all the time with autistic kids is all these really well-meaning people just do everything they can to help the kid get along in the neurotypical world. And they're like trying to teach the kid to be as neurotypical as possible. And I believe that we can all learn how to use our uniqueness well and have strategies, tools, and environments that do that. I guess I want to say one more piece about that, which is I don't think our environment gets enough credit. We tend to think like we send kids off to school and we just kind of think of it as this thing, this time frame, this thing that happens. The environment that they're in can be a container for them to grow, or it can be a place where, because they're unique, they have to literally shut down and put up all these walls in order to survive.
This is perfect. Can you give an example of what this looks like in the real world, if you will? Because I know you have lots of examples. This is what you do. You help people with things like this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
can you just give us all an example?
Yeah. So I know, I'm trying to decide which one to use. I know this really brilliant autistic kid. Well, he's a young adult now, and like he's a dear. He's like one of the most extraordinary human beings that I know. And he could not survive in conventional public education because he couldn't sit still in a chair and listen to somebody. He had to follow his passions. He was in my classroom and he loved books. And when he first came to my classroom, in an effort, the people that had worked with him before he came to me would use books as a motivation and a punishment. And it made me absolutely insane because books were his passion. And the whole way that we use these behavior modifications, a lot of things we learned from dog training, we use in education and services for people that are autistic. And I am not attempting to say that with a really huge judgment on it. It has worked for some people. It really has. And if you're dealing with a neurodivergent person who is truly freedom seeking, which most of them are, most of us are underneath it all very freedom seeking, because it's our natural state to actually be free. And then it can be in conflict with this normal, right? Because so he had been on this cycle of he would have a misbehavior and his book would get taken away, and then he would behave the way they wanted him to and he'd get his book back, right? And just like you train anyone, you can do this, the motivation thing. And I didn't do that with him. I literally just changed to strengths-based because he is so smart and he is so loving and he is so gifted. So why do this like incredibly simple, in my book, kind of ridiculous sometimes, technique when this person is able to be in the world in such a brilliant way? Why are we trying to box him in? And that was all really well intentioned though. The people who were doing that were really loving, good people. I am not bad mouthing that, because there are thousands and thousands, if not millions, of people who use that kind of behavioral training who are very well intentioned, and it does work sometimes.
Tell me if I'm wrong. What I hear from you is the conventional systems are currently set up to try to make people the same, to try to put people in the same box, to try to get the dog to behave the way they want them to behave. Okay, so you just mentioned that you didn't work this way with this person. You worked strengths-based.
Yes.
So tell us, what is that? What is the alternative?
Oh my gosh, it's huge. There's so much strengths-based stuff in the world. So I personally use the Nurtured Heart approach, which was developed by Howard Glasser, and I'm an advanced trainer in that. The Nurtured Heart approach focuses on, and all strengths-based approaches focus on the strengths of the individual and what is going well. And specifically with the Nurtured Heart approach, we actually really take the energy off of really focusing on what's not working, focusing on the problem. And if you look in most of our institutions, we focus on the problem. We're like, we need the problem, and then we look for the solution. And we give all this energy to focusing on the problem. And when a person, for example, me with my dyslexia, I just was told consistently, you're dyslexic, you can't do it, you're going to need all this help, you're never going to read above a 6th grade level. And it was just this like constant, like what you can't do and the problem that you are, right? And just so you know, in the neurological studies, people that are dyslexic are the ones that can see things other people can't see. I mean, I was once on a committee to plan a really big event for hundreds and hundreds of people dealing with something very controversial. And I don't even really remember what it was. But I remember there was a fear that there were going to be like protesters and counter protesters around this event. And I have this whole committee of really like a bunch of PhDs, really smart people. And we were like an hour in and I was like, you guys, what about security? Are we going to have security there? And they were all like, oh, but I saw that because of my dyslexia. I can see things that they wouldn't see because they're following this path, and that's not wrong. It's just that my unique way of seeing is important for the team too. And if you tried to make me normal, then you would just have another person who saw and thought like that. You wouldn't have this team that had access to these different geniuses and all these amazing things all these amazing innovations. So many of our entrepreneurs that are doing amazing things, they are neurodivergent. Because if you're following you're not going to get there.
Okay, so from what I get from what you just said is that the difference here between conventional ways of doing things versus strengths-based is really you're not seeing the person as broken. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And you're looking for their genius. You're looking for their strengths and you're building on them. So Malcolm Gladwell is it in Blink or The Tipping Point? In one of Malcolm Gladwell's books, he talks about how to have mastery in something. You have to have 10,000 hours doing it. And how when somebody's really brilliant at something, they will often just spend all their time doing that one thing. And like in schools, there's all this pressure that if you're really good at something, you don't spend a lot of time on it because you need to spend a lot of time on the things you're not really good at. So everybody kind of has to be mediocre at everything. Everybody's supposed to know how to read and write and do math and know history, and everybody's supposed to know like a little bit of everything. But that is not mastery. That is a jack of all trades and a master of none. If you're a genius at something, then your natural desire is to spend your time on that. But the hegemonic forces in your world are telling you, no, don't do that. Don't spend all your time drawing. You artist in the making, don't do that. Don't become a master at drawing because you need to spend all your time learning math because you're horrible at it. If we take a team and partnership approach, if we stop believing everybody has to be solo, which they're not, we're all interdependent, and we actually acknowledge some of us can't do math to save our lives. We can't. I had a student who could not read. There was neurologically no way he was ever going to learn how to read. And the school just kept putting him in all these remedial reading things. And I was like, for God's sake. And I just got him in all this. He had this body intelligence like no one I had ever seen before. He could do acrobatics. Genius. So I just had him doing acrobatics all the time, watching them, studying them, practicing them, finding him teachers, and keeping him safe because he needed to learn the safety of how to do acrobatics because that's what he was drawn to. But I stopped with the reading, for God's sake. It's not like some people do exist in the world not able to read. I mean, reading has made my life much richer, and I'm a writer, and I love reading and writing. And this kid's not me. So why am I putting my stuff on him? Accept him and see him for his strengths and build on them.
Beautiful. Last question. What do you believe the world will look like when we further embrace our uniqueness on an individual and mass level?
Oh, such a good question. And it reminds me of that Buckminster Fuller quote about instead of trying to change the models as they now exist, create the new ones.
Mhm.
I wrote my master's thesis on applying integral theory to education systems. So education systems are the ones I have thought the most about. And when I vision what the world's going to look like in the future, first of all, I believe that all of this is connected to the evolution of human consciousness. There's nothing else. That's the underlying thing in all of it. And as our consciousness evolves, we're going to be more supportive and more insightful about the uniqueness. And there's always going to be a center of the herd. There's always going to be kind of a normal and then a more and more outside the normal, right? Because there's always going to be innovators. There's always going to be leaders. There's always going to be people that are like in other universes, because that's a part of what pulls us forward. And as our mainstream moves forward, I think things like age segregation are going to end. Right now, we do this ridiculous thing, and it's been an important part. Okay, there's my judgment, and I'm gonna change that. Okay, we have been doing this thing where we've been putting all the 3-year-olds together, and we've been putting all the 5-year-olds together, and all the 13-year-olds together. In most cultures that are closer to the earth, they don't do that. And I am not romanticizing the past or any certain culture. It's just that when you understand what's needed for the development of human consciousness, we need each other, including people of all different ages. And it really doesn't make any sense to just put a bunch of 13-year-olds together and say that's their education and have them with one adult. It makes sense that people are, in a sense, embedded. They're integrated of all different ages, because there are 3-year-olds that are really interested in gardening. And so they're in the freaking garden. And there are teenagers that are interested in midwifery. So I actually knew a teenager who lived in a community where many of the adults were midwives. And she spent her teen years studying midwifery with them and learned everything she needed to know. When a person is ready, this is such good information. I got it from John Taylor Gatto, who wrote Dumbing Us Down and many, many books about what's possible in education. And John Taylor Gatto quoted a study. It's like less than a month. It takes less than a month of time to learn to read, write, and do basic arithmetic when you're ready.
Wow.
Yeah. So keeping people in school for 12 or 13 or 16 or 20 years or 24 or whatever we do doesn't necessarily make sense. So school, I would say about 20% of conventional education will still be useful, because it's not that it's not useful. There are certain people at certain times that classrooms are the appropriate thing. And for the rest of the time, life is the classroom, literally. And what I did is set up a framework to use integral theory to help people understand their strengths and their passions, and to have a map of what to be doing when, as they're moving along and moving towards being bigger in their life. But it starts with 3-year-olds and it goes through your whole life. It's not that you go to school this limited time. And so it would really change. It would also include rites of passage, because those are important parts of our development. And we're really bad at them right now. Kids tend to just kind of do them themselves. And then we get to what we call middle age, which is also a bizarre understanding of time. But when we get to what we call middle age and we have this, crisis, and we have a midlife crisis, that's, and awakenings, right? Like, what if we had this beautiful framework in place to support people when they have an awakening? What if, instead of institutionalizing them and saying that it's a pathology, what if we said, oh my God, you're one of our leaders. You're one of the people on the leading edge here. we need this insight, we need this beauty, and we have a container for it. And what if, instead of thinking of it as this like structure, what if we thought about it as a container that helps you use your uniquely, wow, that was hard to say, a container that helps you use your uniqueness well, like the way water can flow in a channel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the channel helps you use your uniqueness well, but it doesn't change the water. It just helps you direct it.
Wow.
In a way that's useful.
That's beautiful. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, this is great. This has been really fun. Now, where can people get a hold of you or follow you on social media, or, you know, if people are wanting to get a hold of you or just simply follow you, how can they go about that?
That's a good question, Peter. I'm actually in the process of starting Neuro-Uniqueness. So I will have a website up soon, neuro-uniqueness.com. And I will have Neuro-Uniqueness on Twitter and Facebook and maybe some other social media. Right now, at the time of this recording, everything is under both Micki O'Brien, which is Micki is M-I-C-K-I, O'Brien, O-B-R-I-E-N. And it's also under Aligned Education, which is aligned like when we align with something, aligned with ED, education starting with an ED. So there's two EDs in it.
Thank you for joining us today, Micki, and thank you all for being here and being a part of this amazing and powerful information. And we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.